But
No audio.
no audio.
Now you have audio.
Now I might have audio. Adam had not clicked the proper button, so I'll start over.
I failed. I apologize, everyone. Please forgive me.
Yep. Kathy might make fun of you in the chat for that. It happens once in a while.
Only occasionally.
Only occasionally.
And I don't know where it comes from. I never say anything untoward towards her.
Never. So, now that you can hear me, I am Brandon Sanderson, your author for the evening. We have Magellan next to me, the macaw, who is playing with his bottle. And I am signing copies of The Way of Kings, the first 16 pages of The Way of Kings, which will be bound into the leatherbound books that we are having printed. I did 10,000 of these earlier in the year and thought I was done, since 10,000 was double what we had ever sold of one of our leatherbounds. And then you all went and bought 25,000 of them, somewhere around
Give or
there?
take.
Somewhere around there,
Yeah.
give or take.
And so I have 15,000 more. How many more did we order? 15,000. So I have 15,000 more of these to sign. Since we do about 2,000 of these every signing session, looks like you will have a lot of chances to see me signing books for like the next 3 months. See me signing tip-in pages. So look forward to that. Lots of live streams. I guess that's the halo effect of the Kickstarter. The unintended benefit is now you get more live streams because I have lots more to sign. So tonight we've got some fan mail that was sent in that I'll grab, and we also are doing something a little different in that I am going to be answering questions from Rachel Buchanan's writing group. Is that correct? Not your writing group, your group at Odyssey? Is that your Odyssey group? Odyssey being a workshop for science fiction and fantasy, aspiring science fiction and fantasy writers that Rachel went to 2 years ago, year and a half ago. Yeah. I was a guest this year. And she asked if her group could shoot some questions at me, and we thought, yeah, why not let everybody hear the answers? So we'll be doing that, and once we get through those, we may be taking questions from the chat, but we're going to start with those. Am I correct on this all, Adam?
That is correct.
He just pushed a button and made a light glow, so hopefully that changed whatever
that's just to locally record it.
Okay, there we are. So we are recording locally as well.
Yes. Always good to have a backup.
Yeah, it's been a fun couple of weeks watching the rest of the team turn in Stormlight and then realize they have to get Dawnshard ready now. I think Peter is scrambling to get me Dawnshard, the novella, ready for tomorrow, because tomorrow morning I'm going to start doing the 3.0 draft on that. Yeah, I think that's what it is. Whichever draft. I'm only doing 4 drafts on this, so it's weird whether it's the 3.0 or the 2.0 or whatever. It is the 3.0, because I'll do one more after.
So yeah, you're going to start on that draft.
Yes.
But you just started on Skyward 3.
Skyward 3.
So how do you, I guess, juggle those two things?
I prefer not to have to do that, but when we have a tight deadline, like, we really want to get Dawnshard in people's hands before the new book launches. I just feel like it will make a perfect appetizer for Stormlight 4, and also, I mean, it chronologically takes place between books 3 and 4, even though you wouldn't have to read them in that order because there are not major spoilers either way. But I just feel an imperative to get that out. Perhaps it's partially because I know a lot of Kickstarters have failed to deliver. Not the majority of them. I think the majority of Kickstarters do, but there are high-profile ones that don't. And so I would like to be one who delivers on time and punctually for things that we have promised. And so trying to get Dawnshard out like that is worth pushing ourselves a little bit. And what that means is I have to be willing to mode shift between one project and another. It's a lot easier to mode shift between writing prose on one and then moving to doing a revision on another than it would be to modulate or to move from doing prose on one to prose on another. That would be more difficult. So, and it only should take me a couple of days, since Dawnshard is 30,000 words, and I usually move at about 10,000 words a day doing revisions like this. So theoretically, I will spend Friday, Monday, Tuesday, maybe Wednesday if I need a little bit more, and then turn it back into Peter to go through again. And then I will spend Thursday of next week not writing. I don't get to write on Thursdays. I have to do other things like live streams and lots of meetings. Man, did we have meetings today?
That was crazy.
Yeah, meetings with various different companies, and we've been having a lot of publicity meetings over the new Stormlight book, where we talk to all the folks at Tor, and then I have all my random Hollywood meetings, which periodically they're fun, they're different, but they also do take a bit of time. Oh, and there's Jello has decided to climb out of frame as he does. So let's take Rachel's first question from her group, and I will just launch into it.
Okay, Lulu wants to know, what are 3 things that you wish you'd known when you started your career?
Wish I'd known when I started my career. So this is different. Depends on what you mean by career. I'm going to take this in a different direction than normal. Normally, when I get asked this question, it's the things I wish I'd known when I was a new writer, but I've covered that topic quite a bit. So let's talk about things that I wish I'd known when I finally sold and was breaking in. As always, my caveat to these kinds of questions is I would not go back and change the past. I have read that book, and you always end up making America into a bunch of communists accidentally by stepping on a butterfly or whatnot. Don't change the past. It doesn't work in science fiction very well. Never turns out very well. Well, once in a while you save the whales, so I suppose that's okay. But regardless, what do I wish I had known? So one of the things that I think a lot of newer writers don't understand is that you are starting a business. Uh-oh, I'm being invaded? All right, let the invasion happen. We will continue the question in a minute.
Someone's ready for the plague.
Someone is ready. I believe I am being invaded by SCP-049. Is that correct? We apparently now have SCP-049 living in our house. Are you the cure? Yes, you are the cure. Okay.
Oh, I'm the cure.
He heard we were doing a live stream and said, I need to invade. So, the invasion has now happened. You have successfully been on YouTube again. I blame all the YouTubers out there who talk about, if you don't know what SCPs are, this is a collaborative storytelling exercise that has been going on the internet for a number of years. It's really quite fascinating, worth looking into the SCP Foundation. But more recently, my children have discovered YouTubers who like to talk about the various SCPs and their favorites and things like that. And they have all fallen in love with them. My children have, and so they're all deciding which SCP they are going to be for Halloween. And you can see that Dallin has decided SCP-049 is the best of them, and so I've had to find him Plague Doctor mask that is white, not black, because SCP-049 does not wear a black one, but a white one, and a proper hooded cloak, or robe, not a cloak, because it has, he wants to be very exacting with his cosplay. So anyway, going back to 3 things I wish I had known. Number 1 is you are starting a business. Being a writer is a small business. And of course it is, right? Like, that makes sense when you say it, but I didn't know that starting out. No one came to me and said, all right, you are now starting a business. By offering to sell your books to publishers, you are a small business owner. You're going to have to do all of the small business things that come along with, even just being a self-employed individual. And I was not prepared for that. The recommendation that I've gotten, that I repeat, not being an expert in this, is that you generally do not need to incorporate right off the bat. that there are certain tax advantages and legal advantages to doing so, but it also costs money to do so. I would listen to your attorney and tax professional on when the right time to incorporate is. But we are incorporated here, and we did it just when it was only me and Emily and did not have any other employees. And we have always been glad that we did. So understand, though, even if you're not going to start a business officially on the books, you are now a small business owner, and you are going to have to treat your business like that. And so number 2 would be, I wish that I had understood the publishing industry a little bit better. I grew to know writing pretty well during those years trying to break in. But when I got published, I had no idea how books got to bookstores, how books were advertised, and how they were, what kind of, I didn't know what the word co-op meant. Co-op is the way that you collectively with a bookstore promote a book. For many years, the way that co-op would work is the bookstores would have these nice displays in the front of the Barnes & Noble or whatever. This is mostly a thing with the larger corporations, where Barnes & Noble would come to you and say, all right, if we put this in this really nice position, we'll do this for your book for 4 weeks, but then every book that sells off of that, we want you to give us an extra 50 cents on than you normally would. And there, I'm making up the numbers, but they will have contracts negotiated and things like this. So basically anything in the bookstore that is not right on the actual shelf, the alphabetized shelf, everything else is paid for, basically, by the publisher. But it's paid for in this way where you aren't fronting money to the bookstore. You are simply offering them a higher percentage and things like that. It all gets very tricky in the digital era, where co-op is still a very big deal, in fact, an even bigger deal, but now it's not, it's a lot messier, and things like that. So learning how all of that works, that is my number 2 recommendation. Learn the business side of publishing, just so that you know what you're talking about, even if you're going to be a self-published writer. Knowing how these things all work would be very, very handy to you. Number 3, I wish, just kind of off the top of my head, I'm sure there's other things, I wish I had understood that I didn't need to panic when my book sold 400 copies in a week. When we got our first week's numbers for Elantris back, and there were 400 copies, my agent called and said, I've got the opening week numbers, 400 copies. And I was like, oh no, my career is over. 400 copies? Like, I am doomed. This is terrible. And he's like, what? That's really high. Most only sell like 10 from a new author. And I was like, what, really? He's like, yeah, it's very common that a book will sell a dozen or 2 dozen copies its opening week. Not uncommon at all. Now, I am used to we all are used to how many copies movies sell. And we're like, a big launch. But if you're a brand new author that no one has heard of, it is going to take a while to sell any books. And that 400 copy week, I have come to learn, is indeed, for a new author, an enormous launch, which is probably frightening to you as new authors, perhaps listening, being like, oh no. But numbers in the publishing industry are not as high as we're used to hearing from the movie industry. The recording industry is actually around the same. Like when you hear how many actual albums sell, particularly in this era, I've always found it a little surprising that I'm expecting to hear this new album sold 20 million copies. Well, no, it didn't. The best-selling albums in the world sell 20 million copies in their lifetime, often. And so a new album that comes out by a major artist might sell 100,000 copies, and that's really good. Just to give you some frame of reference, this is all weird now because there are multiple formats. There used to be something was released in hardcover, and that was it. The audiobook sales were negligible because they mostly went to libraries, and audiobooks back then cost $100 a piece. And so they didn't factor into sales. So it was just your hardcover release. Now, audiobooks are a huge deal, and ebooks are a huge deal, and they're across 3 different formats at launch, which is great. There's way more variety for people, but it's harder to compare apples to apples in the publishing industry. But when I first hit number 1 on the New York Times list, I think I did that with the lowest I've heard of someone hitting. That's what it is. When I first hit it was with one of the Wheel of Time books, and it was around 75,000 copies in the first week, which is really quite good. The lowest I've heard of someone hitting number 1 on the New York Times list with was 22,000 copies to be number 1, the best-selling book in the country that week. 22,000 copies. When I first appeared on the list, way down at the bottom, I forget if it was, I think it was Mistborn 3, but it might have been Warbreaker. We were on the list back then, the New York Times list, before they'd split it into a bunch of different lists. Very complicated. It went to 35. Now I believe it only goes to 15, but they have more lists. If that makes sense. Like there's a children's list, and there's a middle grade and a YA separate list, and back then it was just one list, as I recall. But we were number 34 out of 35, and I think we hit that for right around 3,000 copies, just a little under. So became a bestseller the first time with 3,000 copies of our book sold opening week, which I think is just going to be stunning to a lot of people. When you get to the top end, things start to sound like people expect them to, right? A lot of books, a lot of times now across formats will be expecting to sell 300,000 or 400,000 copies of a Stormlight book in its first week or two. But when you're brand new and, books don't sell, things just don't sell as many copies in general as people expect. Even those Hollywood numbers that you're looking at, if you look at actual ticket sales, they're going to be a lot lower because the number makes it sound much bigger because that's the gross that they're taking in. So I wish I'd understood a little bit more about what books sell, and I wouldn't have panicked quite so much about 400 copies, which I just didn't believe my agent because I thought, oh, he's just sugarcoating it. He's being extra nice to me, so I won't panic. I know that this is terrible, but Elantris has sold nearly 1 million copies at this point. It's approaching it. I don't think it has hit it yet. And it's sold generally around 400 copies a week for its entire existence. That's what made it do very well. Is it just kept on selling. 400 every week. It's done better. The holidays, obviously, things spike and whatnot. But very interesting to reach hundreds of thousands of books in sales through just slow and steady selling a few hundred copies every week, which is definitely a good place to be in. I'm not going to complain. So when you release your first book and it sells 12 copies, do not panic. We work in a business where we are hoping to get the long tail and to spread word of mouth, and you don't have to sink or swim on that opening week as a first-time author. So there's some answers for you.
Christine says, when in your writing career have you felt the most discouraged, and how did you get past that?
So I've talked about this one quite a bit, so I'll only do a short version of this. I think you have a Q&A with me that's eventually going to go into this deeply. I talk about it a lot. The time where I was the most discouraged was right before I wrote the first version of The Way of Kings, and this was about 2 years before I eventually broke in. I had written 11 or 12 novels at that point, and none of them had been picked up. And I was really starting to question, what am I doing with my life? I kept getting told, sorry for those of you who heard this answer before, I kept getting told at the conventions I was going to, can you write more like George Martin? That's what people wanted. They were really excited by George Martin's books, and, I can see why. He's a fantastic writer. It was taking the world by storm in the fantasy world. This is before the TV show had happened, so it was still, in our niche genre, but everyone was really excited by this. And they're like, can you write like George, but can you be shorter? That's what they wanted. Secretly, they didn't all know it, and none of us knew it, but what they were hunting for was Joe Abercrombie, who they eventually found. They wanted somebody who had kind of the grim, gritty perspective of something like Game of Thrones, but they wanted it to be faster, fleeter, faster-paced, shorter books, because epic fantasies at a long size are a tough sell in the publishing industry, because I've talked about this before, but a paperback of The Way of Kings might cost $1 or $2 more than a paperback of a book 1/4 its size. That's very common. You go, this one will be $8.99, and The Way of Kings will be like, $10.99. So you do get to charge more for it, but not 4 times as much. It's way more economical to publish the books that are 100,000 words than it is to publish the book that are 400,000 words, unless your 400,000 word book is a smash success, which fortunately we managed to have happen. It's just the bookstores don't like it, because they're like, if one of those big epic fantasy sells, it leaves a hole in the shelf 4 books big. We could have 4 books in there. If one of these other books sells, it leaves behind the other 3 books that can still sell. It's just way more economical for shelf space. And they're like, please don't give us these big epic fantasies. Unfortunately, there are people like myself who just happen to love them and refuse to write, refuse to stop writing them, I guess, and force the publishers to continue to publish them because they sell very well. So you might think that the whole publishing industry is looking for the next Brandon Sanderson. What they really love is the next Brandon Sanderson who writes at the length of Jim Butcher. That's what they're looking for. I kept getting told, man, these books are too big. I would submit them and they would reject them out of hand just because of the length. I kept getting told, this is not where fantasy is going. This high magic, weird magic systems, weird worlds. Look at what's selling. It's George R. R. Martin type stuff where it's very kind of back and grounded in Earth history. George's a medieval scholar and did just a fantastic job of presenting a fantastical version of the War of the Roses, right? I mean, it's no secret that Westeros is basically, Great Britain turned upside down with Scotland ripped off and stuck underneath it or on top of it or something like that. It's a very grounded in our world fantasy, and so I was writing these really strange, comparatively epic fantasies, high magic, and everyone's like, we're not interested. And so I had to sit and think, what am I doing with my life? I have 12 unpublished novels. No one wants to write what I want to write. I had taken a little stint to try to write something a little more like what they wanted, and the book was terrible. It was just not... There are times when you can write to market, but that was not a good one for me. And the general rule of thumb of not writing to market is the good rule of thumb. Write what you are passionate about, not what you think other people will be passionate about. And you generally will do better. Asterisk, once in a while, I have to put that asterisk on another tangent, because John Scalzi once told me his publishing story. He's like, yeah, I wanted to be a writer, so I walked into the bookstore and I flipped through what was in the science fiction shelf and said, what seems to be selling the best? And it was military science fiction. And so he said, I think I'll just write one of those. And then he did, and it was really good, and it broke him in. So,
Was that Old Man's War?
Yeah, it's Old Man's War, yeah. John, if I got that story wrong, you can feel free to mock me online mercilessly. But that's how I remember him telling it to me. And so sometimes you can indeed just write to market. If you have the skills of a writer and you are, you were able to make yourself passionate about a story in many different genres, sometimes you can just be like, I'm gonna find out what's popular and I'm gonna write one of those because, yes. Jello really wants one of my pens or one of my buttons. Are you already bored of your toy? How can you be bored of that toy? You haven't seen it in a month. Yeah? Uh-huh. You see the pen in my hand, and you think, I must have that instead of this wonderful toy. I'll give you one when I run it out of ink. And so I had this kind of, long dark tea time of the soul, to borrow a phrase, and then decided, you know what? I just love writing. I have written all of these books primarily because I love doing it. And if I end up old age having written 100 unpublished novels, I am a more successful writer than if I give up now. And so I'm just going to go forward. And that's when I wrote the first draft of The Way of Kings. And right about when I finished that book, I had just finished it, I got the phone call from an editor wanting to buy Elantris. And so my story has a fairy tale ending, right? I had the long dark tea time of the soul, followed by writing my best book so far, followed by immediate affirmation that what I had been doing all along was indeed what people wanted to read. And then I released Elantris and it sold 400 copies, and I thought I had failed in life. But turns out that was very good, and we slow and steadily built. Have I told you guys the time of my career was in the worst place? You should write this down on the stories to have Brandon tell for the official. Sometimes we do these like official Q&A things you've been releasing. Write down the time when Brandon was closest to failing out as a writer, and I'll tell that. So I'll tell you guys a version right now on the stream, but we'll do a cleaner, nicer version that does not have me signing things and being flapped on by a macaw who really thinks he should be the star of the show. Yeah. If you let go, you could fly. But you don't want to let go. So let me grab this stack here, and I'll tell you guys the story about the time when my career was closest to sinking. So the time when my career was closest to sinking was at the release of the second Mistborn novel. So here's what happened, at least in my perception of it, which is just one perception of how events were. But I released Elantris, and as a new writer, particularly in that day, this is before indie publishing and things like that, people are going to find that really distracting, Jello. I can just tell. I know what the comments are going to be. They're going to be like, I'm trying to listen to Brandon tell the story, and there's this giant macaw flapping around behind him. We may want to get him. Could we get a bottle of water to fill up his water dish?
I think there's water in there.
Is there water in there?
There's half an inch of fresh water.
Okay, you guys already got water in there. All right, look, don't bite my buttons, okay? If you need some scritches, you can come over and be on the screen and get scratched. But you can't have the buttons, okay? Yeah. You don't want scritches, you want to be on the shoulder. Yeah, you're going to bite my glasses now. You know you're not supposed to have them. You can't get scritches if you're up there. I can barely find your head. All right. So if you guys can ignore the macaw for a second, I will try to tell you this story. So what happened is I released my first book, and you get kind of a new author halo around you. You go on the shelf as the new releases, and people are like, oh, I've never heard of this author before. And back in those days, it was all in bookstores. There was no ebooks, there were no audiobooks. And so browsing happened in a different way, and new authors got a little more attention, I think back then. I think it was easier when I broke in than when it is now. In some ways, it's easier now because you can indie publish, and also you can charge very little for your book starting out, and you can target a niche. But I think since things are so flooded right now, there are just so many people releasing that it is also, in general, overall harder. And so you got this effect where people were browsing the bookstore and they'd say, oh, a new book released by Tor, the publisher of The Wheel of Time and The Sword of Truth and many other fantastic series, Recluse, and just, well-regarded publisher, and they took a chance on a new author. I'll take a chance on that new author. And so I had this halo effect where people bought Elantris to try me out. And I had always wanted to release a standalone book as my first published novel. I feel like the standalone is not done enough. I don't do it enough, certainly. I think that standalone epic fantasy, some of my favorites are things like Guy Gavriel Kay's Taigana, which is just a masterful single-volume epic fantasy. And I thought, I have tried a bunch of new authors recently, and it's always book one of a 20-book cycle, right? And Joe, this is really awkward. This is why I don't want you on my shoulder while I'm signing. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come down. Look. This is why we have... Oh, you went right for the button, didn't you? Yep. See? This is why we have the thing for you. Yeah. Look. Go up on your thing and play with your toy. Yeah, you don't want to. You never want to. Hey. No biting. Good bird. Good bird. Good job. He is a very good bird, but he is also a very active bird. And so I'm not sure if he will calm down a little bit as he gets older. He's still only about a year and a half old. Or if we will just always have a very, very hyper bird, which is totally okay. He is a very lovable hyper bird, but you have lots to watch. So I had this halo effect from publishing this new book, but it was a standalone. And so when I published Mistborn, which was the beginning of a trilogy, I'd want to do the standalone. A lot of people I'd been reading at the time, they would release book 1 of 10, and then the book would not really end. It would have one of those, and now we've reached the ending point of the series, but we aren't actually ending. And so, all right, fine. Look, here you go. I will give you one. In the name of preserving, this is what I do for you guys. Everybody's attention, so they don't have to pay as much attention to the bird. We'll take the ink out, and you can have the pen. All right? You can have the pen. But you got to be good and stop drawing everyone's attention. Too much. You're here to draw attention. You just can't keep flapping like that. And so I thought if I release a book that's a standalone, people will be able to see that I can end a story. And then when I pitch them on my trilogy, they'll be like, oh yeah, I want to read that guy's trilogy. He was able to actually end an epic fantasy series. I know that if I start something by him, I will get an ending before too long. That was my thought. And I'm still very happy I did that. However, jumping to a new series with new characters meant that I did not get the kind of instant sales that you often get on a book that's a sequel, because the people who have read the first one are like, oh, this is a known quantity. I want to go out and read it. We have this very odd relationship with sequels in the industry, which is why I just kind of write what the story I want to write is and don't worry too much about... I've never expanded something because it was popular. I have always just kind of written things at the length I want them to be. But if you think about it, a sequel really, in the traditional sequel sense, where it's a continuation of the story and the characters, really can only sell to a very select segment of the population, being the people who have read the first one. Your first book could theoretically sell to anyone, but your second book really is targeting people who've read the first one, so you have a much more narrow audience. So why would anyone ever write a sequel? Well, when a sequel works, what happens is people go out and buy it immediately rather than waiting, which gives a lot of velocity to the series, which people stand up and take notice when something is selling like that. The bookstores order more copies. They get behind the series more. People are reminded of how much they loved the first one, and so they talk about it more. And so even though the second book can only sell really to people who have bought the first, in that case, they are talking more about the first, and your overall, you do much better in that instance. This is why you see a lot of thrillers do this. The kind of sequel that isn't a sequel, where it's like you can't tell what book in the series it is because they're all starring James Bond and they don't go any particular order or things like that, because then you can kind of have the sequel effect without only narrowing the audience to the original audience of the first books. But that's not how I like to tell stories generally. Some series work with that way, but generally I like stories that build upon each other, so I do traditional sequels more often. And regardless, Mistborn comes out, and it just, it does fine, but I think it sells like 200 copies its opening week instead of 400 copies. And this is just because, I was no longer a new fangled writer getting all that halo effect of being brand new, but I also wasn't releasing a sequel that people felt they had to run out and buy. And so Tor, at this point, I talked to my agent. I'm like, this is not a big deal, right? And he's like, actually, this one's a big deal. Everyone undersells a little bit often on the second book because you lose that halo effect, but this is pretty bad. And we ended up selling fine, but not great on that book. We ended up selling, like, Elantris did like 10,000 copies in hardcover, and Mistborn did like 8,500 or 8,000, something like that. And the publisher kind of went into mini panic mode. We're like, oh no, this is bad. And so they decided to try something new for the paperback, and they got a new cover to do the paperback. And this was by the same artist who did the hardcover, and I love the artist hardcover editions, but this paperback cover was just not good. It did not properly convey the series. It's not the one that you likely have. You can Google Mistborn original paperback cover. It's got this weird sort of distorted version. Yeah, you've got one. Yeah, you can go bring it over. We'll show it. Of Vin. It's got an Inquisitor in the background with that looks like the Grim Reaper with an actual side, I think. It's really hard to figure out what's going on in it. And it's kind of muted brown and a few dark reds. And it disappeared on the shelf and did not sell at all. That paperback, which they released, just crashed and burned. That's the one. So, Adam, do you want to try and hold this up, or is that working?
You can bring it back a little bit so it gets some of the color. Right there is good.
So again, I really like the cover artist. This is John Foster. He is a fantastic cover artist. But once in a while, things just don't connect between the art director and the artist and the author, and the colors on this. The foiling was really supposed to make it pop, and it just did not come together. And for whatever reason, that book, it just died on the vine. It released and didn't sell at all. And meanwhile, because my first book had sold 10,000 copies, my second book had sold like 8,000 copies or whatever, the bookstores pulled what we call a death spiral move, where they order there's this weird thing where the buyer at the bookstores, particularly back in those days, if they ordered too many copies, they got in trouble from corporate. Or if they ordered too few copies, they got in trouble from corporate. It was a very hard job to do. And so the buyer had to walk this tightrope of how many copies of books do I order. And the best way they could tell what to order was to look at the trajectory of the book sales. So he would look. I bet it was Jim Killen back then. It might have been somebody else. Great guy. Love Jim Killen. I think he no longer works with Barnes & Noble, but Barnes & Noble was the king of the hill back then for book sales. And anyway, the booksellers all did this. They looked and said, well, the first one sold 10,000. The second one sold 8,000. We'll be conservative and order as if it's going to sell 6,000 total. And they all kind of put their orders in based on that. And you can see how unsustainable this is, that self-fulfilling prophecy then makes the next book sell 6,000. Paperback's dead. Nobody's picking it up. So they'll all be like, well, I guess the next one will sell 4,000. And it very quickly becomes unprofitable for the publisher to publish. And this is, it's very easy to get dropped. And so that obviously didn't happen to me. So what did happen? My agent and I went and made an enormous deal of this paperback cover. We talked until we were blue in the face, and mostly with Moshe, my editor, on my side, all three of us just complained to Tom Doherty until I think he was tired of hearing from us and said, fine, we'll put a new cover and we'll release a new edition for the release of the second book. And so that's when they went back to the drawing board. They weren't willing to put the hardcover cover back on because it's like, well, we just don't feel right about that one. We have to do a brand new cover. Joshua explained to me, he's like, they never go back to something they've done before. It's much easier to convince them to do something new, which is an unknown quantity. And so that's when they did the Chris McGrath, the ones that you probably have the photo realistic versions that were the third cover that Mistborn had gotten. Because we bugged him so much, Tom Doherty agreed to release it at $4.99, which was a couple dollar discount with a big $4.99. Some of you may have this copy at home on the paperback. And we released that 1 month before the hardcover of the second book came out and did a lot of praying. Fortunately, the people who had read Mistborn 1, though they were smaller than the number of people who had read Elantris, really liked it. And so what happened is I was saved by the fans because the second book came out and sold out immediately because they had ordered too few copies. And everybody who'd read the first one and the 10 people who'd read the paperback all wanted copies that week. And I was somewhat savvy with the internet back then, as I am somewhat savvy now, and was able to say, hey, if you guys could go buy this week, it will mean a ton. And they listened, and they did, and they saved my career. Because the book sold out nationwide in a couple of days, and Barnes & Noble got to hear my very loud, they're few in number back then, but they were very loud to Barnes & Noble about how they needed to have more copies of this book. And Barnes & Noble rushed in, and all the bookstores said, we need more copies. They did an emergency reprinting. The paperback came out and sold gangbusters with the $4.99 and the new cover. And again, I point to the fans getting people to read it because I was in the death spiral and got yanked, that famous scene you see from movies where they're pulling on the thing and the plane is dive bombing, yanked up at the last minute and saved my career. And after that, the trajectory turned the other direction. Every book outsold the ones before it and by leaps and bounds. And now I sit here where I am. So thank you. For those of you who might be listening, who were those people who went in Barnes & Noble when Mistborn 2 came out and bought it, and then complained if you couldn't, because that made Tor pay attention, and I can't guarantee it, but I'm pretty sure that that was part of the reason that Tom Doherty felt comfortable giving me the Wheel of Time. Granted, it was Harriet's decision, but when she called Tom and said, what about this Brandon Sanderson guy? He said, yeah, he's good. You should read Mistborn. I think you'll like it. And Tom very easily could have said, no, wrong person. But he didn't. He had confidence in me. And maybe it's because we were loud and complained a lot. Or maybe he saw that how energized the fans were. But for whatever reason, Tom was on board from the get-go. Because, this was all happening around the time. Because Mistborn came out in 2006, Mistborn 2 came out in 2007, which is when I got the call about the Wheel of Time. And so, yeah, I think that's what the timeline would have been. Yeah, so there you go. Something's weird in that timeline, though, because I put Warbreaker up for free around that time also, and that didn't come out until, I don't know. You'll have to go back and look at the timelines. But
Wasn't
something
that
like
2009?
Was it 2009?
Well, because we did the 10th anniversary last year.
Yeah, it would be 2009. So I guess I just had that one done and put it up way early. It's hard to remember back in the days, I would finish a book and it would sit in Tor's hand for 2+ years before they released it.
Geez, what would you do if you had that buffer now?
Now, I had this huge buffer. I am fairly prolific, but I looked way more prolific during those years because suddenly when I was skyrocketing in popularity, Tor was like, why are we sitting on this guy's books for 2 years? Let's publish them fast. Let's get them out there. Now I turn one in and they have it out in 4 months and things, because you do not sit on this kind of book in the industry. It's not good for it's very good for your bottom lines when those books released and your quarterly earnings and stuff. Try not to let it slip past a quarter. Anyway, that was a very long answer. How many of these questions are there, Rachel?
More than we need.
More than we need. All right, let's do a few more of them.
So Kyle says, based on your years of teaching between writing excuses and your university classes, what do you think is the most difficult aspect of the craft for a teacher to communicate to a student? And are there any techniques you've developed to target that difficulty?
So the most difficult thing for me to be able to teach a student is how to put it all together. I can really help you with a scene. Rachel has seen this, right? I can read and be like, this scene is working, here's a way to make it better, or this scene isn't working. But the problem is that putting it all together in a package that is a singular book is a lot of work. It's more work than I can do with any student. Like, I am doing this right now for Songs of the Dead, the book I'm co-authoring with Peter O'Rulian, and we'll have him on at some point to talk about just how difficult it is for me to get across what needs to happen to bring it all together to make the book just click and sing, so to speak. Sorry for the pun. But that has taken us 2 years of work on this book, and it's not something I can do with a student, and it's not something that I can even approach teaching you how to do. There is a step you take as a journeyman writer between writing good scenes and turning a collection of good scenes into a cohesive novel that feels like a book rather than a collection of good scenes. And I have no idea how to teach that. I still have trouble figuring out how am I going to explain that to people, because it's partially gut instinct. I've never had to teach it because you can't. I can't read, it's so individual for each one, and I can't read everyone's book. I can read about 5,000 words, and that takes me a year to get through them all. And I'm behind this year. Sorry, students. I just did the 5th one, and there are 15, and I need to have them all done by April. So I'm less than halfway, but we are halfway through the year, so I should have finished 7 or 8 of them by now.
Yeah, you're getting pretty close to the class starting back up,
yes,
which
I am.
Is crazy.
It is crazy that we're getting that close, but regardless, I can't teach this, and I don't know how to. So that's the hardest thing to figure out, is how to teach that. And I also have less confidence than I should that they'll actually listen to me, because the amount that they don't listen to me on the little things gets a little frustrating sometimes, because there are some little changes you can make to your writing that will improve readability quite a bit and are so easy. For those writers out there, put your dialogue tag as close to the start of the sentence as is natural for speaking the sentence. Put it at the first comma, or if you've got a long sentence with no good break, put a beat at the front to say who's speaking. Just always do that. Train yourself to be putting those dialogue tags. Never have the sentence or the paragraph that's like 3 sentences, John said. Our eyes are searching for that, and our brain has trouble of focusing on the sentence properly until we know exactly who's speaking and it clicks in our head. And so what will happen is you'll have this person read a paragraph, your reader, and then not really have read it because they're scanning to see who's speaking, and then naturally will often just move on because that's how they've trained themselves to write, and that paragraph will not have sunk into their brain because they were searching for who's speaking. And it's just a really easy thing to fix. And the infrequency in which my students listen to me on that kind of frustrates me sometimes, because it is such an easy thing to learn. Granted, now you're all going to go find the times that I did that in my books, and you're totally going to be able to find them and be like, but Brandon! Guilty as charged with that, but I think I'm pretty good at it. I think I'm pretty good at indicating who's speaking or thinking pretty quickly and early on in a sentence. And like I said, real easy to train yourself to do. And yet, basically, I'd say 1 in 2 finals I get from students don't do it. So, learn the. Here's a tip for you. If you make a submission to an editor, and they ask you to revise and submit back, do the things that they suggest. And if you are taking a class from someone who has made some suggestions, every writer is wrong. It may be the wrong suggestion for you, but try it at least, particularly maybe if you're submitting your final, say, I'm going to try it their way and see if it's better this way or not. Try it out. And for something as simple as that, it really should just be something that you train yourself to do after you have it pointed out to you, like I had it pointed out to me early in my career by my editors. Like, look, just move this up and it'll be so much more readable. So, there you go. Rant over. Rant about students over. Oh, we're going to do fan mail. Adam's pointing. All right, we got something big here. So he's thumbs upping that I need to look at this. Adam needs to take a picture for the audience.
Oh, sorry, already did.
Already did. Okay. All right. So, Brandon, thank you for the stories, and thank you for being so generous with your fans and those of us who are hope to make storytelling our livelihood. It is my pleasure. As I just told you, I survived because of some good fans. There weren't many of you then, but the ones who were there saved my life. So, streams are wonderful. Enjoy my little bit of silliness. I think it says Casey. It might say Lacey. Presents enclosed for your boys, Emily, Adam, Isaac, Kara, and staff whom I don't know. Sorry, other staff. So what do we have here? Oh, I think did I see these online? They may have posted these on the Stormlight archive.
You're so cute.
They are little Magellan stickers.
You've already fought over them.
You've already fought over them. Look at that. And he has a button. Jello. Casey or Lacey. Oh, it says Lacey. Lacey gave you a button. He doesn't care. He's chewing on the ceiling right now. Those are gorgeous. I love them. There's something larger in here. So let's see what this is. Oh, it has a sketch on it of Princess Leia, it seems like.
Oh, it's on the inside of that. That's just to protect it.
What's that? Oh, it's just, I was just saying that this actually has a sketch on it. And here it is. Adventures in the Cosmere. Caw spelled as a bird. Do you have a picture of this?
Yeah, I'm going to pull it up right now.
All right, I'm going to read it. The set, I have not seen this. I swear I saw a little picture of Jello done this way online. So, Lacey, if someone put it on Reddit, I did see that. But the sun sets over the shattered perch. Our hero and his friend face the parrot Shendy once more. He summons his shard pen and is fighting the parrot Shendy with a floating button. And he fights the parrot Shendy, who backs him up. And he reaches to the side to resummon his shard pen, but is fallen into the chasms. Jello likes to dunk his pen in water. Button, please come back. No, squawk. He dunks it all the time. Bedtime, Jello. He gets my button. He likes this. He gets like this when it's past his bedtime. Squawk.
It's like you've said that before.
It's like...
So cute.
This is delightful. This is amazing. Thank you, Lacey. I love it. Jello. Yeah, you found your bell. That button is now, I guess, his friend. It's not from this coat. It's from my favorite coat that he got the button off of. It took him about 3 seconds. Yeah, I'm talking about you. Yeah, I'm not going to get you down. I don't even have any treats. But look what Lacey sent for you, not knowing that they had Jello. Here is some more. Here's some more. I don't know if I can get it on. Here's some more bubble wrap for you. Yeah, bubble wrap. Hello. Are you going to say hello to us? Or are you going to just hear that bubble wrap and want to go for it? All right. We'll put the bubble wrap with his bottle and see what he does. Thank you so much. All right. Question number 4?
3 or 4.
3 or 4. They probably submitted like 30.
Something
Yeah.
like that. Alexa says, and you kind of touched on this in the
Okay.
last, and but you've touched on it before. But they say, what are skills or areas of writing that you wish you had focused more on when you had first started writing?
Yeah, I often point out the thing that I needed to learn was revision. Jello, you can't squawk like that, even if you've just been the star of a comic strip. Because there are people listening on headphones or in cars. Well, I doubt they're listening in cars because I'm used to the podcast format.
They may be. I'm sure
there
there's
might
at least
be.
one.
At least one out there streaming me into their car.
Please
I
don't
hope-
comment
yes.
if that's you.
Yeah, hopefully they're not driving. Hopefully they're
That's true.
sitting in the passenger seat. And yes, but regardless, there are people out there that do not need you screeching in their head, their ears.
As someone who's wearing headphones right now, I
Yeah.
am one of them.
So revision was what I needed to learn. I very, very much liked finishing a book, recognizing its weaknesses, and then going on to another book, which I tried to do better. Which did some things for me. It taught me how to world build and taught me how to start stories and things. But what it didn't teach me how to do is take a good story and make it great, or a mediocre story and make it great, which is a hallmark, in my opinion, of a master of the craft, is someone who knows how to do that. Revision is more controversial than I expected it to be. There are some people who do believe that you should write your book one time through, make a few continuity fixes, and then be done with it. I have not found that works for creating the type of art that I would like to create. I suppose give both methods a try, but I have found that if I don't really dig into a work and get some feedback on it and then see if that's what I want it to be and then learn to shape and change it, that I can't create great stories. First draft stories, I can do a pretty good first draft, but I cannot do a great first draft. And I needed to learn that. Yeah. We need to have almonds over here that I can give him. You want to get a bag? Do you have a bag of almonds? If you've got a bag of almonds, if they're salted, just wash them off so he doesn't get too much sodium.
Or we can just send someone next door.
Because he's getting a little tired, but he probably wants to do his tricks for everyone. And he did not get to hang out with me very much today because it was a day of me being in meetings. And so he's feeling neglected, as you could probably tell earlier when he insisted on sitting on my shoulder and getting head scratches at the same time. Yeah, I am talking about you again. All right, next question.
So this is a related question.
Oh, there he comes.
Okay.
You did it. You let go. You let go. Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Oh, slow
You
clap in the
clapping.
background.
Yes. We will flight train him as soon as he wants to fly. But yeah, you let go and you actually flew over. What are we going to do? We're going to have to, what you have to do when a parrot is flighted is you have to station train them to sit on their station and not fly all around the room all the time. I don't know how good he's going to be at that. Huh. Why don't you hit me with another question? Yeah.
So the related question is, do you still do writing exercise to focus on areas to improve your craft, or do you begin with any projects with the intent to work on any
I
specific
generally
skills?
do that with projects that I'll be like, on this one I want to do better at
he's on the
this.
microphone.
Oh, he's eating the microphone. Jello. Of course you're eating the microphone. Jello. 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 You can probably hear that.
Yes, I can.
Yes, you can. Jello. That's a microphone. That's very impressive that you found that. It's actually very impressive that the microphone did not immediately die. You can't have it. You can't have it. Nope.
Sorry for everyone who had
No.
headphones in for that.
Yeah, sorry about that. No. Can't have the headphone. Can't have the microphone. He's learning what that word means. No. No. Come on. Come on. Yeah, I know. I know you don't want to. Look. Oh, good bird. Good bird. That's a good bird. He knows how to do that trick. Good bird. We'll put him on this shoulder and see if he's okay up there. Again, he's feeling neglected, and so we'll let him sit on the shoulder a little bit. He's actually a pretty good shoulder parrot. Not perfect, because he does go for the glasses now and then, but he is pretty good. Oh, we do have some right there. Okay.
Thanks, Lex.
Yeah, thanks, Lex. Sorry to everyone who was listening to Jello eat the microphone while, what was the question we're on?
Do you start projects with the intent to work on specific skills?
I do. Every project, I have a few things I want to work on. Lately, it's been a lot of prose things, just trying to level up my prose. It's a fine line to walk because I do believe in window pane prose that is pretty transparent and lets you see the story without distracting you. But there are ways to do that better than I currently can and would like to get better at that. But there were also some things related to handling of mental health that I wanted to make sure that I was working on a little bit as well for this newest book that you're going to be getting. And so, yeah. His favorite thing in the world, what's that?
Oh, your arm is
My arm is on the microphone.
Sorry.
Yeah, this is good to have you there listening. You are the stand-in for all those poor folks who have probably turned off the stream by now, because if you're listening on headphones and he is doing this and I am doing
we still have 2,000.
You still have 2,000 of you watching me scratch my macaw's head.
It's riveting.
Yes. Mm-hmm. All right, next question.
Lee says, when you're writing a novel that you know will have sequels and other books in the same setting, how do you handle planning out things to be revealed in future books? Is it all pre-planned? If not, how do you leave yourself space to bring in new things?
Yeah, this is an excellent question. This is a really excellent question because there is kind of a catch-22 going on here. The catch-22 is this. You want every book to be super exciting, but you need the first book to be, particularly as a new author, to just be stunning. And so a lot of writers leave some of their best ideas for later in the series, which is not a terrible instinct, right? You need those later books to be exciting. But the danger is that then you make the first book boring because you leave all the best stuff for later, which is a bad idea. And so generally, a way of looking at it that at least has worked for me is instead of trying to save the best stuff for later, trying to narrow your scope. It's not about trying to make sure that you aren't putting everything cool in at once. It's more, how can I take one segment of the story and put all of the coolest things relating to that segment into the story possible? If that makes any sense. Ask yourself, there are things, sometimes there are too many ideas for a book. This happened to me with the original draft of Way of Kings. Too many things going on. And so I wasn't able to do any of them the justice that they deserved. If you've read Way of Kings Prime, I feel that's one of the big weaknesses of it, is there were too many great things that were left for later on because I would try to do too much with too many characters. Whereas when I rewrote it, I said, I'm going to focus really on Kaladin's story for this first book, and I'm just going to do that the best I can and put all the best moments I can in there. For me, having a structure is what lets me do that. For instance, with Mistborn, I said, all right, my structure is going to be this. I'm going to have an interesting aspect of the hero's journey I'm going to look at in each book. I'm going to look at, the prophesied hero. I'm going to look at the prophecies themselves. I'm going to look at the end of times, and I'm going to try to do them in kind of a modernist take on that. The other thing I did is I said, I'm going to do the best I can with allomancy in the first one, and I will save Ferrochemy as a magic system for the second one, and I will delve deeply into hemalurgy in the third one. This, again, let me divide up the awesomeness and have stuff later on. Hey, that is my ear. And then I could do what I thought was a really great job that had lots of interesting things, but that told a complete story while leaving something for later on. And for the Stormlight Archive, the way I said is I said, I'm going to divide up the characters. You're going for that microphone again, huh? No microphone. No, I know you want it. I know you want it. You can't have it. You want to do your tricks? Let's do your tricks. Come on. Oh, you're okay. I know. All right, let's do your tricks. Then we might have to send you to bed.
You probably want to roll. Oh, never mind. I can do picture in picture.
Yes, picture in picture. All right, Jello. All right. Use the force. That's the wrong one. There you go. Good bird. Yep. He's learned a third one, but he won't do it on command yet. So we'll see if he'll do it tonight. The most of the training I'm doing right now is to get him to wear his harness, because now that he is becoming flighted, taking him outside without his harness is too dangerous. So, all right. You still have some. All right. Dragon. Good bird. Yeah, I know, but you can't get down on me. So there he goes, and he'll dunk that. That'll keep him distracted for a minute. Adam, do you want to ask Emily if she'll come get him for bedtime? So that those who are distracted by the bird can have an hour or so. I don't even know how long it's been. Birdless, and those who love the bird got an hour or so of bird doing bird things. We'll see. We'll have to see over the years. Do you calm down? Do you learn to fly, and so you end up spending the whole time flying off to pester the minions for treats? Will you do your third trick? You're not going to do it, but we can try. This is the trick my children taught him, and so he does it every time he sees my children, but he doesn't like to do it on command. Jello. Yeah. Oh, you still have that treat. You're not even hungry. Yeah. We'll see if he'll do it. All right, Jello. Dance. Will you dance? Dance. You won't do it for anyone but my kids. He did it today for a treat for the first time. And so we're still working on it. Dance. No.
What you should really do is teach him to cackle whenever Kathy walks into the room.
Whenever Kathy walks in the room. All right, we'll give you one more. Go ahead and do use the force. Good bird. All right. So, Emily should be on her way, coming to collect him to go to bed. 8 o'clock is normally his bedtime, but he can go down a little bit early. He loves mirrors, as I've told you before. And so he can go into his room with the bird in the mirror, which he doesn't actually get to spend very much time with because he spends most of his time in his aviary. And he really kind of enjoys that. So it's a nice thing because my previous bird, Beaker, did not like to go to bed and would never go back in his cage. And Jello is pretty happy to go in his cage because he gets hazelnuts and he gets to see the bird in the mirror. Who he will sit and do all his tricks for in a row while saying the names of them, which he won't do for us. Let's get another question.
Okay.
I'll try to stay focused on this one.
Kyle starts off with an apology in case you're tired of answering this question. They say, how much time transpired between finding an agent or editor who wanted to work with you to becoming a full-time writer making a living wage?
Good question. It's not too tiring. It is an excellent question. It's only one data point, but I got the call that I mentioned earlier with Elantris selling in April of 2003. April of 2003. It was very fun. I got to walk into my theory of writing class in my master's degree in creative writing at BYU, and my professor, Professor Jorgensen, said, all right, well, did anything happen this week of interest to you guys? And I said, I got a book deal. And you have never seen a professor be as tongue-tied as he was because he had never had a student do that to him before. Get a book deal in the middle of one of his classes. So that was pleasant. So how did that book deal play out? I tell this story elsewhere, so I'll be very short, but I had submitted to Moshe, who I'd met at World Fantasy Convention in like 2000 or 2001 or something. It was in Montreal, whenever the one in Montreal was, World Fantasy. And then I had met Joshua, who became my agent, at the Nebula weekend. Whichever year that the author of Flowers for Algernon got the Author Emeritus Award. Daniel Keyes, is that his name? That's the only year that I went to the Nebula weekend. And met Joshua there. I started submitting to him and getting rejections, but I got form rejections at first, so he didn't remember that he'd met me. But I did start getting detailed rejections from him, which was a very good sign. I didn't revise and send to him because witness my earlier discussion of me not being good at revision and just kind of ignoring it. I should have revised those books and sent them at his request, but I did not. But I had liked the way his feedback was coming. So when I got the call, I sold without an agent. When I got the phone call from Moshe saying I'd like to buy Elantris, he had read it in one night. After he took 18 months to start it. And I am still convinced he's the only person in publishing who actually read it, looking at my rejection letters. I did submit some other things to Ann Sowards that she did read because her rejection letters were actually very good and personalized as well. So thumbs up to Ann. But I had never sent her Elantris, and everything else I got was form rejection. And Moshe said, I kept looking at it. It was so big. I kept moving it to the bottom of the stack, but you were such a nice guy. And I thought, I need to read that nice boy's work. And he read it in one night and called and offered to buy it. That was April. So then I called up Joshua and said, hey, I just got an offer on a book. Do you want to represent me? And he's like, well, send me the book. So I did, and he read it, and he said, this is good. I'm willing to take you on as a client. Let's go. And then negotiations took until November of that year. That was nerve-wracking. It took way longer than I wanted it to for these negotiations. I wanted to just be like, yep, put a stamp on it, say yes, now I'm a published author. But Joshua wanted to argue for this and argue for that, and everything he argued for, it turns out, was very good that he did. Took that much time. It was actually the World Fantasy Convention that we got the contracts at. Because I went to World Fantasy every year back then. It's kind of the business-focused sci-fi fantasy convention. And back in the days, before the internet really took off, this was the best way to interact with people and to network and things like that. I still remember I got the contracts. We went out for Korean food. I signed the contracts. And he had me go in and make a copy in the Kinko's, which was still a thing back then. That you went in and made copies of things. And I came out and Joshua said, did you get a receipt? And I'm like, no, it was 15 cents. He's like, go back in and get a receipt. It's a matter of principle. You now need to be keeping your receipts for everything. So I went back in and got a receipt. This is also, side story, this is also the time where I first really learned what type of person Joshua Bilmus, my agent, is. We went into a Borders, and Joshua being Joshua, hey, he's way up there. Hey, Jello bird, look what I've got. Oh, look at that. Oh my.
He's like, is that the microphone?
Is that the microphone? Can I have the microphone? Is that a button? Can I have the button? All right, come here. Step up. Good bird. Yeah, good bird. Here you go. Good bird. All right. Night-night.
Pushes thing towards the wall.
Hey, it's okay.
Yeah, he's got a picture-in-picture or something like that, but I'll push it over. Okay. Good night. He doesn't know night-night, so. Joshua, we went into the Borders because we passed one on the way, and Joshua is like, oh, let's stop at the Borders. So what does Joshua do? He goes into the Borders, he counts all the books by his authors on the shelf to compare them to what corporate at the various publishers had told them that the Borders were going to order. He knew how to read the stickers on the back of the Borders books. They had their stickers that said how big a shipment was and what number out of that shipment this was. And he wrote it all down in a notebook so that he could go complain to the publisher if the bookstores weren't actually taking the books he wanted. He then made space on the shelf. He did not turn anyone else's book around or anything, but if there was extra space, he took his author's books and put them all face out so that they could,
More prominence.
Yeah, more prominence. Again, never moved another person's book except, to squish and see if there was room and stuff like that. Very conscious of that. But he then went and looked at the co-op spaces at the front of the store and found where their books had sold out and there was nobody there. He's like, this is wasted space. So he went and put some of his author's books in those places. He's like, they'll catch it in about a week, but until then, we get free co-op. Until then, nothing would have gone there. So this is very Joshua. Bookstores do that, by the way. They don't ever want that to be empty space, and so they will go through, if they don't have the co-op book, put things there because empty space looks bad. So it's actually something that the bookstores would have done. Joshua just made sure that his author's books all went in those extra spots on the nice tables at the front and did all those counts, wrote them down in his book, and then this actually came back when Elantris was on order. Tor had said that Barnes & Noble was taking an order of 4 copies per store. Joshua went in and found out that they hadn't gotten 4 copies per store, they had gotten 2. And he called and complained, and Tor called and complained, and what came back to me is like there was a typo. I don't know if it was actually a typo or if they got caught, someone didn't, whatever. Regardless, 2 more copies went to every Barnes & Noble after that because of Joshua. So, there's Joshua for you. And he is amazing. He is a wonderful human being, and really knows his book business.
The book business and walking are
Book
2
business and
things
walking.
that Joshua knows.
Yeah, Joshua. My favorite other story is we once had Hollywood meetings in. It was in Beverly Hills. I'm pretty sure where we were. And we showed up at the hotel. I had taken a cab. Joshua had come in earlier in the day. We met at the hotel and both checked in to our rooms at the same time. And Joshua, I asked him how the walk was, and she's like, "Oh, where did you go on a walk?" He's like, "From LAX." And he had walked from LAX to the hotel, as I knew he would,
With luggage.
With luggage. And the receptionist at the front desk was just like, like number one, that's like a 6-8 hour walk, something like that, through not always the best neighborhoods. Joshua just did his thing and walked through them, pulling his luggage, and he loves power walking, and he loves seeing cities by walking through them, and he always goes to all the bookstores he can find, and that's Joshua. Horrifying people when they learn, but he's a New Yorker. You walk. That's what you do. So back on track with the thing that happened in November 2003. So first offer, April, contract signed in November. First book release, May 2005. So was under 2 years of revisions and waiting and things like that, but about 2 years and a month from the time of first offer. What I made on that book was $10,000. $10,000 advance, which was split up, I believe, in 3 payments. 1 payment on signing, 1 payment on release of the hardcover, 1 payment on release of the paperback. It might have been 2 payments back then, half on signing, half on hardcover release. I sometimes forget. But either way, I was getting it in chunks. The book then went on to sell about 10,000 copies, with me making about 10% of cover price, which was about $25 back then. So I made about $25,000 off the hardcover, which you can tell, 10,000 advance, $25,000 on hardcover. If you know anything about the business, that was considered a very big success. 2.5 times the advance just on the hardcover. Everyone was very happy by that. Thumbs up, everything's great. Usually, if your book earns out on the hardcover, which means you earn back your advance just on the hardcover, it's a good sign. It's also a sign that you got paid too little, according to my agent. But you get that money on the back end anyway. Regardless, I didn't get that money, however, until, let's see. So book comes out, sells 10,000 copies in the first year. I get that money the following year in May. 2006 in May is about when I got the next payment of maybe about 10,000 of that 15,000 they owed me. They would have kept around 5,000 back because they couldn't know if bookstores would suddenly return huge numbers of copies. And the way the book industry works, if they return huge numbers of copies, that comes out of everybody's money and we refund it and stuff. So weird business stuff. So I made basically $5,000-ish, maybe $3,000. I think it was 5 and 5 back then. I made $5,000 in 2003. Well, I got that check in 2004. So 2004 I made $5,000. 2005 I made $5,000 because the on publication money came. 2006 I made $10,000. And then from there, my income for the next number of years basically doubled every year until it hit right around where I am now. And then it just kind of, now it's a very gradual uptick. And so it was, in publishing terms, very meteoric rise. But it was across maybe 10 years and things like that. I made a living then, not on the year that I made 20,000, but I'd say the year I made 40,000 was the year that my wife quit her job to start working on the business with me, and we really thought things were taking off because we could see how it was going. 30,000 doesn't go, or 40,000 doesn't go as far as you think it does in book terms, because that 40,000 is minus 15% for the agent. That has to come out of that, and self-employment tax and insurance and things. But we knew that next year was going to be really good, and indeed it was. That was the 80,000 year. And so that's about, I would say the 80,000 year is the real actual year that I made a living, because that 40,000 was really closer like 25 or even 20, which was not enough to live on. But we lived in a little townhome, and my wife during those early years had that sweet, sweet public school teacher money, which was what we supported ourselves on. When I was making $5,000 a year, she was making the big bucks. She was getting paid like $32,000.
Looking at second houses.
Yeah,
with that kind of
I
income.
mean, it was serious money, right? Marry a public school teacher, then you'll be rolling in it. That's what everyone says, right? And it was the 80,000 year, I would say, that we really we made our first real money. But the year after that, we probably went down a little bit, because even though, again, what we made doubled, by then I needed assistance, and I was hiring Peter, and I was doing a lot of traveling and a lot of these things, and so, but yeah. So yeah, how many years is that? What years that we made so 2005 is 5,000, 2006 is 10,000, 2007 is 20, 2008, so it's 2009, about 2009. So before I really felt comfortable that we were making what would be a normal, slightly above but close to the national average amount of money after all the agent things and after the taxes and stuff.
So that's longer than I thought. That's 6 years after your first book got picked up.
Yeah,
that's
when I really felt comfortable. But I'm kind of. It's hard. We'd have to go back and look at the numbers, because something else that was weird happening here is we got the Alcatraz movie deal, which was $35,000, and that was in there somewhere. I think split in 2 payments, and that really, like, there was a year where we would not have been able to make ends meet if we hadn't gotten the movie check, which $35,000 at that point just for doing nothing and selling movie rights felt like just an insane amount of money. And so that might have come like in there somewhere. I don't know. Like, I have this in my head. I bet it wasn't as strict as doubling every year. It was very loose like that. And so we'd have to go back and look at the actual numbers. But it's possible. In fact, I would be willing to bet that 2007, 2008, we were feeling comfortable. Emily was still working through the first part of 2007. I'm pretty sure. She didn't quit until the end of the school year, 2007. And so whenever that was, we felt like we were okay that we would be able to make it at least the next year. So, but yeah, it takes a lot of time to get going and a lot of time to get the money out of the business. One of the big arguments for indie publishing is that you don't have all those weird lead times and them reserving money back just in case all the bookstores return, which they still do, even though we are 82% digital, which those returns don't happen. Like, you can still get a refund, but the bookstores aren't holding on to huge digital stock. The way that returns work, bookstores order a whole bunch of copies of the hardcover, and then whatever they don't sell, they send back and get a refund on. Doesn't happen in the digital world. And so sometimes Joshua has had to have very stern words with publishers who are like, oh yeah, we're having a standard reserve against returns. Oh really? Against the 18% that are physical on these? So
makes me wonder what kind of interest rates they're getting on holding that money in reserves in their accounts.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because I would imagine that's a significant sum.
Though I saw the numbers today, I went towards planning to sell the hardcover, looking at that on the hardcover of a new Stormlight release, they feel it's going to be more like 50-50 digital and print. But pre-orders, it's 18% print, 82% digital. So, question.
So, Lee says, what are some pitfalls you've seen when primarily short story writers try to make the jump to novels?
Great. So the only one I have a lot of experience with doing, being there when he did this was Eric James Stone. Wonderful writer in my writing group, won the Nebula Award for a wonderful story that I love called That Leviathan Whom Thou Hast Made, and made the jump and wrote a novel, and we workshopped it, and really the biggest problem was there was just not enough to it. He was stretching to make each scene long enough to be novel length, and the book and the first draft ended up, you'd have to ask Eric, but I feel like it ended up at like 60,000 words, when you really want even a short novel to be like 80,000. And so what would happen is he's so used to being economical with his words that he would not describe things very much. He would use his real sharp short story writer. He loves flash fiction descriptions, which are great. And I don't know that I would recommend he extend them because they work just fine in novel form. But the problem is that the plot that would a normal novel writer would have taken 80 to 90,000 words to write, then came out that short for him. Now, maybe it would be right to just publish it at that length. His publisher was like, no, this is too short. You need to expand it. And so he needed to add more subplots, add more story, add more. It was only a single viewpoint book, so he couldn't add a second viewpoint. But he just had to expand. He had to learn to expand to more subplots. And that's the thing I noticed with a lot of short story writers is you want to be very economical. You don't want to have a lot of subplots because you just can't deal with them. You don't have a lot of side characters who are going through their own arcs. And things like that. And novels, that is a lot of what we do. When you read, Dawn Shard is about Rissyn, but there's a small plot arc for multiple other characters. Lopen's got one, even Huyo's got one, because, I'm a novel writer, and even when I write a shorter form, I'm doing novel writer sort of things. This is why I can do novellas very well, but anything shorter is harder for me. And so that's what I would recommend to you is talk to some people who've done it, right? Mary Robinette made that jump as well. And I actually don't know if I've asked her if she had any trouble doing that, but I know for Eric, finding enough length to justify a novel was a challenge. And this book is very good. It's called Unforgettable. It has a cover that I don't think does the book justice. How about that?
It's a good book.
It's a good book. It's by Baen. It's a very Baen cover. I'm very fond of Baen, but they really like pulp covers. They're kind of a pulp publisher. And sometimes I don't feel that the covers necessarily match the content very well. He's also got a new short story collection, which we need to push on our channel because I did the foreword to it. I need to write a blog post on it. It's wonderful. And he even wrote me and said it's out, but I haven't.
I'll make a note of that.
Yeah,
so
let's
we
make
can-
a note of that because it is an excellent short story collection, which you should all go and read because Eric is amazing. We should have him on the live stream at some point. Eric and I have a fun story where we both knew a mutual friend. And the mutual friend was saying to me, he's like, oh yeah, I know a guy who writes science fiction. And I'm like, yeah, everyone knows someone who writes science fiction. I'll believe it when I meet them. He's like, yeah, he's won some awards. I'm like, I'm sure. Yeah, something like the Nebula. And I'm like, what? You know someone who won the Nebula? And meanwhile, he was talking to Eric and being like, yeah, I know this other guy who writes fantasy. And Eric's like, yeah, everyone writes. And he's like, yeah, he's published. Oh, yeah? Yeah, Tor publishes him. And Eric's like, you know someone who got picked up by Tor? This is, Earl. Yeah. So we eventually met each other at a con or something and exchanged stories of our mutual disbelief in one another's accomplishments.
So Christine says, and I have a guess on what you're going to say about this. They say, how have the challenges of writing changed over the course of your career?
Ooh, excellent question. So one of the big challenges, this might be the one you're thinking of, is time management has become a different thing through the course of my career. Early in my career, I was very able to just sit and write books, and nobody wanted to hear from me. They just wanted, the publisher's like, yeah, turn in your books, we'll publish them a couple years later. And now we have daily, it seems, requests for publicity. And managing that has been a really big challenge. I want to, by the way, thank you guys for supporting the digital release party for the new Stormlight book. The bookstores were all very skeptical about this because I was making them all do one big digital release party rather than me doing 10 separate ones across 10 separate days. But you guys went out and supported them, and those bookstores basically all sold out in a couple of days and asked if I would sign more books for them. So they're all suddenly like, wow, this is great. Thank you for that. That's going to save me a lot of time instead of having to go to, 10 different events doing the same presentation as opposed to one extra long spectacular event that everyone goes to. Just seems so much better for everyone involved, but the bookstores were a little scared of that the turnout wouldn't be good.
Well, it's so different and new for them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They've been operating the same way for 100 years.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I know people really like to meet me in person, but we're going to have to scale that back enormously this year anyway. You guys saw the blog post probably where I said I'm going to have to move to only personalizing 100 books and everyone else just gets a signed book ahead of time. And so this is basically the same thing anyway for most people. So I'm hoping to do more digital events like that in the future because tours are just killer. Tours just, man. The worst one I ever went on was the Words of Radiance tour because by then I was, how should we say? When the Wheel of Time happened and suddenly everyone was paying attention to me, I prepared myself and said, you know what, this is going to be a few years of attention, and then I'm going to go back to the way I was before and kind of be a small, just barely getting onto the bestseller list, an upper mid-list writer. And so I told myself, okay, I can do these big Wheel of Time tours along with Harriet, plus they would try to get them to end early so Harriet could go back to the hotel room and things like that. And I would usually actually stay a little later, but still they would wrap up and things. So when Words of Radiance was happening, I was thinking, by now, things will have calmed down. And then that was even bigger than the Wheel of Time tours. We had this very, very weird situation happen with me that it does not happen in the publishing industry. Usually, you write a book series for something else. Like people who write a Halo book say, a few people come over, you pick up a little bit of an audience, but mostly you stay with your own same audience, and you do them because it's fun to do. If you like Halo, you write a Halo novel. If you like Star Trek, you write a Star Trek novel. But you don't really expect any audience to come over to you. It was very different for me. Every Wheel of Time book sold more than the book before it had through the entire series. And then when Words of Radiance came out, it just kind of took the next slot in sales. and sold what a Wheel of Time book would, which we did not anticipate at all. And that just kind of kept escalating. Oathbringer outsold that, and we already have pre-ordered more copies in most formats than Oathbringer sold for Rhythm of War. So we're on this weird trajectory. It's not what you expect. And so I was not expecting the Words of Radiance tour to be big, and it was enormous. It was huge. It was not bigger than the A Memory of Light tour because a lot of extra people came out to that just to see Harriet and things like that. Yeah, it was crazy, and it was like 32 days with a different date every day except for Sundays. And they even booked me on a few of the Sundays, which I didn't want them to do. And I was dead after that tour. But that's one of the things that's changed. I have to be very consistent with my writing, even when I have a lot of travel ahead of me. Last year was really important that I do that so that Rhythm of War could come out. And I had 3 international tours last year. And international tours are even more of a difficult thing to handle. I love traveling. I love going places, which we can't do this year. So I'm missing it. But man, was that exhausting. I loved seeing you all in Germany, and I loved seeing you all in Israel and in France and in Spain at Celsius. Celsius is a wonderful time. But man, it laid me out. So there's that. What else has changed? I now have an entire team behind me. Anything that I don't have to do, and the things I have to do are write the books and revise the books, right? This is what Brandon has to do, and I have to sign the papers. Anything that I don't have to do, we try to get someone else to do. Keeping charge of, this is why, I can let way more continuity errors slip into the first draft, when before, I would have to go back and reference my old books and things, and now I can just put in brackets, Karen, can you find the answer to this for me? And just move on, so that I don't have to worry about it, and then I can fix it later on. I can trust that my team will be able to catch some of these problems, which lets me focus on theme, character, world building, and all these things that I really like to focus on. And so the fact that I can offload some things to other people, to their brains, the fact that Adam can watch my email. He gets, if you email me, Adam gets a copy of every email sent to me by anyone, no matter who it is, so that he can say, by the way, you got this email from this person, you probably want to respond to that. So he gets it and Isaac gets it. And so this is just there so that people are looking over my shoulder. So when, we get, as I can't say the name, but, a major celebrity drops us an email and says, hey, would you like to chat? Adam can come and say, Brandon, open your email and answer this one, so that I don't, miss it, which I often used to do.
Well, you get so much email, It's easy to miss things.
It's easy to miss things. And so it's just really handy to have all of these people, but it changes the way I approach writing. I don't have to worry about a timeline. I know Karen is going to reconstruct it for me, and then I can look it over, and then I can make changes in the revisions if there are things that are just not working. I don't have to worry about my email. I can answer what I can, and the team can catch everything else. I don't have to worry about copy edits, where the proofreaders and things have gone through. Peter just makes that all happen. I can turn in my final draft and walk away and work on something else without being distracted by it. And I know Adam will handle the publicity. Isaac will make sure that the art goes in the way I want it to. And Peter will make sure that the copy edit is handled. And Karen will make sure that the books get into everyone's hands. And that is just a really relieving thing to have this whole team. I should say Karen and her team. Kara and her team.
Everyone but Kathy.
And what, Kathy? Oh, we're not going to mention Kathy.
Oh, thank you. Yes, you're right.
Kathy, for those who don't know, is my sister-in-law who is also Emily's assistant. And Kathy's got quite the varied job, which sometimes involves singing to Jello to keep him happy while I'm away. Sometimes involves doing my kids' homework with them. or watching them throw water balloons at each other so that Emily can get taxes done, or sometimes baking treats for writing group, or various other things. And she and Adam have an interesting relationship.
A terrible relationship.
Terrible relationship. Yeah. So thank you, Kara and team, for setting up these things as well. I don't have to worry. I used to have to get these things, sign them, and mail them back myself, which you all know is a huge pain. And now I just scribble on them, and then people whisk them away and magically make them appear in the publisher's hands.
Can you imagine if you had to do all of this
back
then with these numbers?
Yeah. If I had to sign 25,000 of these back then, let's just say that wouldn't happen.
A nightmare.
Yeah. Poor Emily. When so one of the tips I got. Here's a fun tip for you. So in the book industry, we talked about returns, right? Bookstores can return what they haven't sold, and generally, you want there to be returns. This kind of goes into retail theory, which I'm not an expert in, but what it was explained to me by Tom Doherty, who is the publisher at Tor. He said, so the idea is if you sell 100% of what you put into the stores, probably means you could have sold more. It means that there are people who went to the store trying to find it, like when Mistborn 2 sold out. You never want to sell all your books because it means there are people who wanted it who couldn't get it. However, if you have print too much, then you've printed all these books that take up warehousing space and cost to print and all these things, and that affects your bottom line as well. So what he always shot for was a 70 to 80% sell-through, which means that of the books they print, they sell 70 to 80%. And the astute watcher might be saying, well, what happens to the 20 to 30%? And that is where the bargain shelves at bookstores comes in, and where your discount books at the there were a lot of them back in the day at like the shops. What do you call those shops? Like the shops at Riverwood, the outlet malls and things like that. And the Barnes & Noble shelf where things were, that you would get a book for $4.99. Basically, when all the returns came in, the publisher then would sell them bulk to these places again. So they'd actually come back from the Barnes & Noble to the warehouse, all be marked as returns. They often would get a little Sharpie mark on the spine somewhere, usually actually on the leaf of the book. And so if you turn a book upside down and look along the bottom, you'll sometimes see Sharpie marks. That's a return. Then they would resell them for just pennies, for $1 a piece to these bargain discounters who would sell them then at like $5 a piece. And as an author, you just don't make any royalties off of that. The publisher's not making any money off that. It's just, it costs about $1 to ship one of these books. So at that point, you've probably spent $4 in shipping on this book that's going to sell for $5, and you probably spent $5 printing it. So you might say you shouldn't print so many, but the way it actually turns out is you earn more money printing a few more and getting some returns because there were plenty on the shelves for people to buy. Regardless, most publishers will sell you the returns as the author if you make it known that you want them. And early in my career, the way this all started, the whole business with Kara and the minions and the house that we have bought that they work out of and the warehouse we will soon buy, all came about because I heard this piece of advice from Dave Farland, and I'm like, that is really good advice. And so when Mistborn had more than expected returns, because they had printed the 10,000 hoping to sell them, and then they ended up selling. They probably printed 12,000 because they expected to sell hopefully around what they'd sold. Anyway, they had larger than expected returns. I called Tom Doherty and said, I want to buy all of those. And Emily's like, that's a lot of money. It's like $3,000 is what we ended up spending or something like that, $2,000 or $3,000. And I'm like, Dave told me I should buy all of these. We should buy all of these, even though we are living only on the sweet, sweet money from public school teaching as a middle school teacher. But we went ahead and we basically spent like our whole advance check one time on buying our returns from the publisher. And I filled our poor little one-car garage with all of these boxes. And then, because I had faith that these books would take off and that I would be really happy that I had those. And then lo and behold, the books took off and I offered signed copies for sale on my website. And lo and behold, all these signed copies sold at cover price when I had been able to spend, $1 on them and, not having a garage for several years. And, how did we go full time? One of the ways we did was off of selling those books. We don't really get returns anymore.
They're very rare.
Very rare. The difference is nowadays, number one, we've moved so much to digital.
Yeah.
Is the really big thing. And number two, we like to sell on our store just high quality books. And a lot of times returns have been returned several times and they've gotten dinged up and stuff. And so we just generally these days make an order like a bookstore to the publisher and just have first printings that didn't go anywhere else and sell those. But for years, returns were one of the ways that I made this all work when the money was not flowing as well as it was not rolling in the bestseller money back then, shall we say. I don't get a roll in it now, do I? No.
Sorry,
No.
I have to take
Do we need to give you a Scrooge McDuck
Yeah,
experience?
Scrooge McDuck thing. That never looked very comfortable. Scrooge, I guess,
looked
was
very
magical,
painful.
But yeah, it looked very painful. I could roll in my magic cards. That's where a lot of our money goes.
Well, and then all the value would go away.
Then all the value would go away. We are going to get me a Beta Black Lotus. That's what we decided, right? When the Kickstarter, we actually figure out how much we earned from the Kickstarter, which we don't know yet because we have to pay a lot of shipping and we want to make sure everyone got their books. And so we don't know how much of that money we get to keep yet. But when we do, we're going to buy me a Beta Black Lotus because I have an unlimited Black Lotus and it is very shameful to have a white bordered Black Lotus. I know. So that's what we're going to do. Someday.
And did you want to keep going since you finished that stack? Or
We'll do one more stack.
Because we have about
shall we?
10.
Yeah, we'll do one more stack if that sounds good.
If you don't finish it all the way, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. If we don't finish that stack, we'll just see how it goes. You're getting lots of tangential stories tonight. So hopefully you all are enjoying your random brain tells you things. But let's do another fan mail while we're at it.
Yeah, someone in the chat said that we should start calling these meandering tangents, tangents or something like that.
Brandon's Night of Tangents. All right, so to Brandon Sanderson. My name is Jordan. I will read the rest of this later, Jordan. They have highlighted for me a few things to read as questions, and then I will look at the fan mail later. So, I'm a BYU student. I was wondering if you will be doing a book signing at BYU for the students. Probably not this time. We're not going to do any in-person book signings because of COVID. If you wait for a year, there's a good chance that I will be doing one. But this is just a bad time for me to be encouraging large groups of people to come together in a small space and, touch the books and hand them to me and have them handed back. Just, we want to be very responsible. The thing is, I have a chance to be very responsible and to encourage others to do so. And I would like to be the person that you look to and say, well, Brandon is being responsible. I can as well. So we try to be very careful about all of that. Will we see more of Vasher and Vivina in a certain upcoming book? Yes, you will see at least one of them in a book coming out this November. You'll at least have a reference to the other. You may see one of them in 2 chapters as Tor is releasing them. If you would ever consider writing someone with dyslexia into your books, I will. I would, in fact. Haven't found the right place to it. My son is dyslexic, and he has a big challenge with school. Dallin, who you saw earlier, wearing a plague doctor mask, is just smart as a whip, but has real trouble with school because he is very dyslexic. He's in the 5th grade now and is still having trouble reading because of how bad his dyslexia is. And, he's in lots of extra tutoring and things like that. But he just loves it when he finds out, like Dave Pilkey, who does the Dogman books, is dyslexic. When he finds an author who's dyslexic, it means a lot to him. and finding a way to get dyslexia in. I would probably want to do it in a book with a word-based magic system, because that would be an interesting thing, because having someone who's dyslexic who interacts with words differently than everyone else would be a really fascinating story when there's a conflict related to the actual world building. But we'll see. We'll see if I can ever find time to do that. There's a lot of things to do, and dyslexia is one of those harder things to get across in fiction because people aren't spending a lot of time reading in most books, and so it is a character attribute, but it's not the sort of thing that comes up in the story all that often unless you construct the story in a way that it will. All right, hit me with another question from the writing group.
Okay, Lee says, do you have any advice for how to stop noodling with the world and setting and settle down with a particular plot and particular characters to tell a story?
Yes. So there's a famous episode, I don't know if any episodes are famous, of Writing Excuses. There's an episode of Writing Excuses that I remember called Advice to My Friend. I have a friend who did exactly that, spent years noodling, and I asked the whole team at Writing Excuses, so see if you can Google Advice to My Friend. I think I gave him a fake name, and I don't know what fake name I gave him, so I won't mention the name now out of respect for his privacy. I can't remember if I did or if I gave a first name. He may have given me permission to give his first name. But either way, Writing Excuses episode named that, where we all talked about this idea, because he'd spent 20 years working on his world and never gotten to the book, and he wanted to. Understand that there's nothing wrong with spending 20 years on your world if that's what you love and you want to do, right? Like, it's only a problem if it is your goals are not being met. And it sounds to me like yours are not. So my answer to that, and I think I gave this in that podcast, was to set a deadline for yourself. I love world building. I love spending time on it. I could spend years world building before I start a book. I have found that those years, that taking that much time doesn't necessarily equate to a better book, because a lot of that world building that I'll spend my time on ends up being irrelevant to the story. And if I had written the story sooner and then gone back to my world building, I could have been much more effective and made world building that was way more interesting and helpful to the story, because I ended up throwing out a whole bunch of it because I didn't know the themes and the characters and these things yet, and I didn't know it would be relevant to them. So understand that more time in world building does not equate to a better book all the time. Sometimes it does, depending on your goals and the type of world building, the type of writer you are, but most of the time I would say, no, it does not necessarily correlate. So give yourself a deadline. Say, on this day, I have to stop world building no matter how much I've done, and I have to start writing my story. Maybe November 1st for National Novel Writing Month would be an excellent time. I've been thinking that we'll be posting some encouragement each week during National Novel Writing Month. But yeah, set a deadline. Just set a deadline and stick to it. And if that deadline ends up being too short, and you're writing the book, and the book you're like, this would have been better if I would have spent more time, then you know to extend that deadline. My guess would be that once you finish the book, or the story, or whatever it is you want to do with it, you'd be like, wow, now I know so much better where I should spend my time world building for the next one, and I'm glad I stopped and started writing the story. I could be wrong, but that would be my guess.
Kyle says, what is the weirdest writing exercise that you think is genuinely helpful to writers?
Weirdest writing exercise, genuinely helpful? I don't know. There aren't a lot of weird ones. Like, all the ones that I've done are pretty standard, right? I've done the person opens their purse or pocket or whatever, or billfold, throws out a bunch of things like cards or whatever they've been carrying, and says, construct a story based on this. And I came up with a great story. And that's very commonly done as one of them. I've done the put down the computer and write with a pen and paper, and had a good experience with that one. I've rarely found a writing exercise that didn't work, because so many of them are focused on getting you to actually write instead of thinking about writing. And as long as it does that, it tends to be pretty good. Like, I really like the only write dialogue and see how much you can convey with dialogue one that I've talked about before. I like a lot of Mary Robinette's writing exercises, where she made me write a flash fiction piece that was terrible, but I really like the exercise. That one's in the lecture series from this year. So yeah, I don't know that there are any ones that you would be like, wow, that's really weird, but I guess it works. They all just make you write. Writing sprints of various types. The programs, I've never tried these ones that lock your computer out of the internet and everything for a given amount of time until you have written for a certain amount of time, or that reward you with experience points for the number of words you've written and then level up your character. Those all sound fun, but I've never needed that. What we don't need for Brandon is motivation to keep writing.
Yeah, your favorite writing exercise is to write.
My favorite writing exercise is to be like, ooh, what part of the story do I get to do today? I will try to hit this goal. And once I am done with that goal, I can go play Civilization or something. And then I do it. And sometimes I go longer. Usually I go longer.
Speaking of Civilization, I know many people in the chat are wondering if you'd ever be willing to do a stream or maybe do a video of you playing a game.
So here's the thing.
I don't want to ruin the game for you.
Civilization would be so boring for me to stream. I think it'd be a really boring game to watch, because
even if you were talking about, I haven't even seen it in a long time, but
maybe if I were talking about stuff like, what I do is I have a friend, Donald, who has a little video game stream, and he's like, hey, if you ever want to come on and do something, maybe come on this, and they are doing Demon's Souls Remastered for the PS5. And I thought I could do that, and you could all watch me embarrass myself horribly in trying to play a video game as a 45-year-old man on the internet. And you can see what happens to one's reaction times when one is no longer spry and young, and watch me die a whole bunch and talk about why I love the Soulsborne series. But maybe we'll do that. That one... It will be embarrassing, but the thing is, the games are hard, so everyone expects you to be terrible at them, so they won't really blame me. Like, if I played Halo, and everyone saw that I was terrible at Halo, they're like, come on, Halo is easy. Why are you being so terrible at Halo? So, really, the Souls games, they mask your inability, because, then there's the speedrunners who do the whole game in, 15 minutes and never get hit. Those people are amazing, but, the most of us mortals are pretty bad at the Souls games, despite liking them. So maybe I'll do that. I just feel like Civilization, maybe I could go run people through what I do as a setup for a Civilization game, because I do a kind of unique style of game where I've modded it myself to play the way I want to play, and I could talk about that maybe.
I think people would find that interesting.
People might
let us know in the chat if you think that would be interesting.
But then that would require Adam to hook up it. A streaming thing with a video game.
We could always do it prepared.
Yeah.
Where, it doesn't have to be live stream.
We just,
that would simplify it.
I don't know. I think people like the whole live stream thing with video games in particular. But then they really want to see me. I'm willing to bet, I can't see the chat or anything, I'm willing to bet they would love to see me die a whole bunch of times in Demon's Souls. That would be really cathartic to some of them, considering what I do to some of the characters in books they read. So, I don't know. We'll see. That's totally on the table. The thing that it's been very hard for me is I keep getting invited to do live role-playing sessions. Dan runs one of these. It's very fun. And that I found actually very hard to do because it's performance. And performing as someone else is not something I have experience doing, and it's not something I enjoy doing. And you might say, that's surprising, Brandon, because you're a writer, and every book is you performing someone else. But I get to get that perfect before you see it, right? It's an oddity of my life that you would think I'm a really good storyteller for my children. My wife is way better at telling stories to my kids, because I will sit there and be like, all right, let me come up with a plot and characters. Give me a few minutes. All right, and then I'll start and be like, no, it'd be way better if I did this. And then I will rewind their story, and they're like, Dad, and I'm like, no, this happens, and then this happens. And I'm like, oh, wait, what if I, and then, I'm just terrible at the live storytelling thing to my kids when you come up with a story. I'm good if I'm reading a story. I can do that very well, but, live role-playing, too much twigs this sort of part of my brain that's like, no. I want the story to be satisfying and good. and I want to work on it until it is satisfying and good, and then I want to reveal it to you. And in some ways, live role-playing feels like the magician who is performing all the tricks poorly before they get to perform the tricks well, and you watching that, and it just feels wrong to me. I did it once at a Gen Con, and though everyone was delightful, I thoroughly loathed the experience because I didn't feel like I was able to present a story that was up to my standards in that format, and so it was not something I enjoyed doing. And it's very weird for people to think that, because for people to hear that, I'm sure, because I am a storyteller at heart. I really, there's a bit of me and Wit who wants the perfect opportunity to tell the perfect story at just the right time, and anything else is dissatisfying.
So you're wondering if people would be interested in you playing a game, and Heather from Facebook says, we watch you sign your name repeatedly and play with a bird.
Yeah.
She thinks that the concept has proven itself.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you do sit here. But in this, you at least get to see me interacting with the camera and being bitten by a bird. And so, but yeah, they would probably, Heather has a very good point. If you are willing to watch me sign my name,
and they can even see the paper.
Times, then maybe you would enjoy watching me play a video game. So maybe we'll do that when Demon Souls comes out, and if we can get a PS5. They're sold out.
They're sold out. Yeah.
But Jeff got one, my brother-in-law, so we might be able to borrow his, or at least he has one ordered. Who knows? So we might be able to do that and play that. And I love that game. It's my, the first, of course, because it was the first one that came out. But man,
do they not have a remastered version for PC?
They've never had a remastered that I know of. I don't play them on PC because I need a controller.
Well, you can hook a controller.
I know, but I've never hooked a controller to my PC. I've only had a gaming PC for like 3 months. Remember? And so I will get a controller hooked up to it, but my PC before was not worth hooking a controller to. It had trouble with a turn-based Civilization game, let alone trying to play something that was actually graphically intensive on it. I used to see it smoke when it tried to play Minecraft. So now that I have a real gaming PC, I've been itching to try. There's some games I want to play, and so. Yeah, but so far I've only played FPSs because I'm so used to mouse and keyboard for FPSs, and tactical games like Civilization or whatnot. So
you still Fallout 4?
I did finish Fallout 4, which I enjoyed. I enjoyed for what it was. I went on the journey that they wanted to provide, and I am happy with that journey. New Vegas still remains my favorite Fallout. By a long shot, but I did not have as many problems with Fallout 4 as other people have had in the past. I've heard lots of complaints about Fallout 4, and I took it for what it was and enjoyed it for what it was. I'm more disappointed in Borderlands 3.
And I haven't played that
Borderlands 3 because Borderlands 2 has one of the all-time best villains in any piece of media I've ever experienced. Just fantastic villain and some really solid writing that was very emotional that went along with that. And that was really a shock because Borderlands 1's story was basically non-existent. It was kind of an afterthought. I hear from behind the scenes that a lot of things went into them just having to ship a game without much of a story. And it was a great game and I enjoyed it. But then I got to play Borderlands 2, and Borderlands 2 had a really fantastic story, primarily because how great the antagonist was. And it just was a fantastic game because of that. And I am disappointed in Borderlands 3 because the story is not great. I can tell that a lot of people tried, and they were making an effort, but it just didn't work. And so I was disappointed in the story of that. The game is the best of the Borderlands games by far. The mechanics, 2 had this problem where I always felt like when I got a cool gun, I couldn't use it for more than 15 minutes before it was obsolete. And that was no fun. And Borderlands 1 felt very repetitive. Borderlands 3 just fixed all of that. Just a delight to play. All the powers felt really fun. All the voice acting felt really good with the characters. Whoever did the character writing did a really good job on that. And there were some really interesting things with the story, but they made a classic mistake that writers make all the time, which is the protagonist has nothing to do with the plot of the story. And you run into this in books. Here's good advice for you. Try to make sure your protagonist is essential and involved in making decisions in all parts of the story. And I would say that goes doubly true in a video game where you are supposed to be, you have actual autonomy. Readers in a book don't have autonomy, but players of a game do. And I don't know what happened, but they did this thing where every cutscene, your character is not in the cutscene. It's all the other characters discussing things. And you never, in any of the cutscenes, have anything to do with any of the story. It's as if you aren't there. People get killed in front of you, and your character doesn't lift a finger to try to help. It's like they wrote it without any of the characters, and made it all about the NPCs, which just did not work for me. And there's some really brilliant stuff with some of the audio logs and stuff that really was cool that they did a good job with. But the main core story, you feel like, all right, now I'm putting the controller down. They're going to tell me a story about unrelated characters from a different video game. And then they're going to give me the controller back, and those characters will be like, all right, go on your adventure some more. And then when you get to the pre-described moment, you will put the controller down and continue watching the movie. That was bad enough in Final Fantasy when you were playing the character. But it worked in Final Fantasy because it's like, now my character is doing the stuff that I can't do with the controller, and it's going to be awesome. And this, you just vanish. You just watch people get shot, and you just apparently were standing there getting coffee or something, while the bad guys that you were fully capable of fighting and defeating a few scenes later just kill your friends and stuff. And anyway.
Brandon, why don't you tell us how you really feel?
Why do I really feel? It's disappointing because I expected so much more after Borderlands 2.
So is it bad in comparison or just generally?
It is not a bad. It's a fantastic game with a mediocre story,
okay.
Right? Like, it's better than Borderlands 1's story, so it's still up. And in fact, I'm more but it is not exceptional. Following exceptional, it's hard to follow up exceptional, right? Like, we just watched the next movie by the guy who made Your Name, and it's a great movie, and I would recommend it. Your Name is still better. It's one of the best, romantic, slightly science fiction movies I've ever seen, right? It's a really good. Your Name is really good in this. Like, a lot of movies I like are really good because they're super epic or do something really strange. Like, I love Infinity War, right? Your Name is not Infinity War. It is a small story and it is cute. That is the best description of it.
Told well.
It's a cute story told well. It's just a 10 out of 10 of cute stories told well. And the next one by the same director is like an 8 out of 10 of cute stories told well. That I wasn't disappointed in, right? Because doing a 10 out of 10 again is really hard. And I don't begrudge an artist doing something a little different and new and not hitting a 10 out of 10 for me when they give me an 8 out of 10. The problem with this is I felt like Borderlands 2 was a 10 out of 10, and then they came around and delivered me a 5 with some really obvious mistakes that it seems like anyone who played it would be like, yeah, but why don't I get to do any of this? So anyway, there's me complaining and ranting. I hope that no one who wrote Borderlands 3 is watching this. If you did, some of the character writing is great. Zane is a delight in every moment and every time he opens his mouth. And I can't get enough of that voice actor and the way that they wrote them. And the Typhon de Leon stuff really landed for me. I thought it was well done and well designed and kind of an interesting way to approach doing audio logs. But the main storyline did not land for me. You had a question. You were going to raise your
Well, I was going to
finger
say, I think I heard that Netflix or someone picked up to make a live action of Your Name.
That'd be cool. I hope that they make number 2.
No,
right?
of Your Name.
Oh, of Your Name. Oh, a live action of Your Name?
Yeah.
Oh. Well, it could be done, right? It definitely could be done. I am less excited by things like that because, like, translating a book to film, I'm almost always excited by, right?
But a film to film?
But a film to film, like, it's a near... here's another rant for you. I'm trying to expunge from my language near perfect when it is regarding art. I may have talked about this before. Art, like everyone's like, oh, it's not a perfect film. We always say that because it's like, I have to be willing to nitpick because otherwise I don't have street cred, right? And if someone nitpicks, I have to be able to be like, okay, right, that's a nitpick. You're right. So I have to say it was nearly perfect. But I don't think nearly perfect should be used for art. I can just say it's a perfect film. I like it as it is. And all of its flaws are part of what make that film. And I think films can be perfect because they are art. Like we watched, we rented the theater. You can get the theaters for $100. And my dad just loves movies and hasn't been able to go to the theater for 9 months or whatever it is. So for his birthday, we rented the Cinemark and went and saw How to Train Your Dragon, which is one of my favorite movies, and it is a perfect movie, right? Yeah, sure, go ahead and nitpick. I'm still going to say it is a perfect movie. I am glad that movie is exactly as it is, and Your Name is the same way, right? That movie, maybe you can nitpick things, but that movie, I don't want improved. I want that movie to be that movie forever, and I'm glad that it is. And improving it might mean adding digital rocks in front of R2-D2 for some reason. And so let's just, that's why I'm trying to get rid of that phrase. Your Name is a perfect movie. It is exactly what it should be and what it was intended to be. And so in that case, I'm like, why?
Well, especially when it's such a subjective statement. Yeah. It's perfect for you. You don't need to explain that to anyone else.
No, I'm saying why remake it?
Oh, sorry.
But yeah, you're right. But of course, other people might be like, oh, I would like this better.
And which is also perfectly valid as well.
Perfectly valid, but that's why I don't get excited by movie remakes as often. There are some films that remade with modern special effects and storytelling can make me excited, but remaking that, I'm like, why? Right? Making Borderlands, that I'm excited by, right? Let's see something. Making a book into a film, ooh, I get to see something new that and interpret it a different way. But
Fallout.
Yeah.
So
Fallout.
There's going to be a live-action Fallout now.
Oh, yeah?
So they're doing a live-action Fallout and a live-action
yeah.
Uncharted as well.
I wonder what version of Fallout it's going to be.
I would not be surprised if it's not any of the games, just post-apocalyptic America.
Like that, what do they call it? They have a phrase for it. It's like something, they've got a punk for it, because there's a punk for everything. And it's like ray gun punk. No, ray gun punk's the one before. That's the what we call in the industry, what do we call it? Retro futurist. Yeah. There's a thing after that for the 50s punk. And I can't remember.
Is that the Atomic Punk?
Atomic Punk, you got it. That's right. It's Atomic Punk. So doing an Atomic Punk movie, that could be cool. I mean, we're still waiting for the great video game movie to come out, right? Like, Detective Pikachu was good, right? This was a good movie. But we're waiting still for the truly great one, in my opinion. So maybe somebody can do it. Maybe it'll be the Illumination Mario. Can't be worse than the other one. All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out, keeping me company while I did random things and made you listen to a bird eating a microphone. We'll be back in 2 weeks. I think Isaac's going to join us in 2 weeks. Sorry to Rachel's writing group for getting to like 5 of your questions in 2 hours. So take care.